Hi there and welcome back. You're with Terry from Bonsai Tree. I'm working on a customer's trees today, and so I'm going to be taking you along. If you find the following content helpful, then you can thank me by clicking the thanks button just below the video. The first tree on the bench is an Acacia burkii. The tree has been allowed to grow freely, and this is why it's in such a good state of health. A very common mistake that people make is to keep their trees neatly clipped at all times, and this actually leads to a weakened tree over an extended period of time. The first step in working on this tree is to study it carefully and find out what the essence of the tree and the shape is. Once completing that exercise, it becomes a lot easier to determine what branches need to be removed or those that need to be shortened. I'm not a huge fan of thorn trees. As you can see, these thorns are quite formidable and they can inflict a lot of damage to both clothing and to your skin. One solution to this problem is to cut the thorns off. However, this can be quite time consuming and is only really necessary if you plan on wiring the tree, which is not something that I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be using primarily clip and grow to style this tree today. Branches which are growing directly upwards are easy pruning decisions to make. Elongated branches can be shortened to leave 2 or 3 buds that can be developed and add to the ramification of the tree. Some pruning decisions are motivated by the need to have a change in direction of the branch as well as taper. Heavy branches such as this one, which have little taper and also no change in direction, need some attention. It's advisable when making large cuts like this with your branch cutter to not try to do it in one cut, but rather in a series or in successive cuts. Once you've made the initial cut and you're left with a stub, then reduce the stub until all the unwanted material is removed. Branches which are growing vertically down are also to be removed. In this African style, branches which grow to the interior of the canopy are also quite acceptable and necessary to form the crown. This branch will however be removed as it's growing horizontally to the ground, and it also originates from a fork. In nature, these trees have a very broad canopy in an effort to protect the roots from the sun. I felt that this branch extending to the right was a little bit too long, especially considering as it didn't have any ramification. Cutting it back to 2 buds will then produce 2 new branches, which will also be more delicate and perhaps be a better addition to the canopy. Be sure to protect all your cuts with a suitable tree sealer, as this will prevent contamination or infection in this open wound of the tree, as well as promote callus formation or healing of the scar. The clip and grow technique results in a more angular growth pattern. I find this aesthetic to be very suited to this style of tree. Over the months to come, tertiary branches will be encouraged to develop and fill up the volume of the canopy. With the acacia behind me, I can now move on to the next tree. This style of ficus was extremely popular as an import from China some time ago and was very commonly found in many garden centers. They tend to be highly stylized and very often very one-dimensional, in other words, very few front and back branches. My objective with the tree today will firstly be to remove the unwanted branches, and then also by means of wire to position branches forward and backwards, which will create better volume to the tree's canopy. These grafts low down on the trunk seem to be taking away a lot of the sap flow and depriving it of the rest of the tree, so these will be reduced quite dramatically. I'll also be defoliating all but the tips of the branches. Defoliating this species takes no time at all. You simply push the leaves slightly backwards and they fall off. This tree suffered an attack of spider mites, and so these leaves are not functioning properly, and it'll be better to remove them and stimulate the tree into growing new leaves and branches. I kept roughly 4 leaves on each branch, and I also did not cut the tip of the branches. Branchlets which were originating from below structural branches were removed. Branchlets growing in the fork of other branches or in spaces where really they didn't have any future were also eliminated. After preparing the tree, I then moved on to applying some aluminium wire to the branches. This pad will be kept for now, although I think in the future it will be eliminated. This next foliage pad should be developed a little bit further to create more volume. This next branch and foliage pad creates movement from the left to the right and is a very important part of the design or future design of this tree. This next foliage pad should be held back and not be allowed to develop beyond the point at which the lower branch has developed to. Finally, the apex of the tree is also being developed to the right, which complements the lower branches and the movement of the tree that I'm trying to create. The next tree to be worked on was this collected wild olive. I first worked this tree a number of years ago, at which point in time it was extremely weak, but as you can see from the images, it has really gained a lot in vigor. Part of this dramatic increase in vigor is attributed to the fact that the branches were allowed to be developed uncut. Part of the work today will be to cut these branches shorter and also to eliminate branches which have no future. This would include branches growing directly upwards, as well as opposite branches which essentially would form a bar. The growth pattern for olives is opposite. This means that leaves are on the opposite side of branches, which also means that buds that develop from these leaves will also be opposite. As I'm under a lot of time constraints, I will again be using clip and grow on this olive. Thus, when making pruning cuts, I'm looking for leaves which are growing to the side in which I want the direction of the branch to develop. Buds will develop on both sides at the base of these leaves. However, only the growth which is developed in the desired direction will be retained. The initial focus will be to develop the structural branches. After this goal is attained, backbudding will then produce the ramification that is required. An old pruning cut has resulted in this branch becoming quite weak. In such situations, it's often better just to remove the entire branch and then work with new vigorous growth. Growth such as this, which is developing into the interior of the canopy as well as in a downward angle, should rather be eliminated. Once again, you want to be sure to seal all the open cuts, as this will just help the tree to resist any kind of infection. Wild olives certainly have a hard time healing over large scars, so this you shouldn't expect. However, smaller scars can certainly heal over in not too many years. This next tree, a Trident Maple, is the one that I was looking forward to working on the most. I remember meeting this tree a number of years ago, at which point in time there wasn't really much to it, but the customer has done a fantastic job of developing it to what you see before you at the moment. Late spring is a great time to work on these trees, as the leaves have now hardened off and pruning can take place. My plan for working on this tree today is to first apply some very thin wire to these branches, which are really whip-like, very long and quite thin in fact, but this light, almost wisp-like feel is really suited to the rest of the tree, which is quite tall and rather thin for its height. Normally with Trident Maples, I would grow the branches out and then cut them back in again and thereby introduce taper. In this particular example, I want to keep the branches as long as possible and also retain their light and airy feel. The wire that I'm using is quite thin aluminium, probably 1.5 to 2 millimeter wire. And because the bends that I'm making are very subtle, the angles of the wire can be extremely large. Once you've established the outline of the silhouette, then all branches above the lowest branches need to be slightly shorter. This will result in a nice rounded canopy. thicker aluminium wire was then used to position the heavier branches. As you move up in the canopy of the tree, the branch angles will of course change, meaning that lower down, branches are orientated slightly below horizontal to the ground. In the apex, they will have a much more vertical orientation. As mentioned earlier, the angles that I put into the branches is very slight because the trunk is very straight, so it wouldn't make any sense to have dramatic bends in it. I was extremely happy with the outcome of this tree, and I'm also certain that if the customer can continue to care for this tree in the manner in which he has done so far, the tree will only improve with age. If you found that content helpful and you'd like to thank me for it, please do so now by clicking the thanks button just below the video. And that brings me to the end of this customer visit as well as this video. I do hope that you learned something, and if you have not done so yet, please do like and subscribe to my channel. For now, thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.